Hey y'all, this is Marie from our Okie Homestead. I'm back in the kitchen. Just parted out 8 chickens that I had my husband pick up, and so that way I could make me some chicken broth. I got all the backs and the wing tips and some rib meat, skin, all that stuff in here. I've got it set in my roaster. Then it gets to sit and cook and cook and cook. Okay, so this has been going most of the day, and I'm fixing to add some more water to it. You can tell from looking at it how rich that is, all that layer on the top, that yellow. So I'll make some nice broth. I'm going to do some in quart jars, since that's what I'll need for the holidays. And then I'll do some pints. So this has sat here. I've had it cooking at 400 for several hours. I've cut it back to 150 to let it start cooling down. But it has cooked plenty long enough, and I'm going to start ladling it into my jars. With the jars sitting here and they're nice and cool. I've got 2 of these. Put my big one in here. Add some water to your canner. And then start heating it up on the stove. And then put your jars in there before you put that hot liquid in there. You want your jars to heat up and get really warm before you start trying to put hot liquid into them. You don't want to turn around and try to pour hot liquid into a cold jar, because you're liable to crack it or break it. And set our jars in there, and then turn on the burner and start letting them get them warmed up. Got my vinegar handy, ready to wipe my rims, because that's a very important step. I kind of suspect when I canned my chicken breast that maybe one of the jars, the jar that didn't seal, I may have not gotten it wiped good. So that's a possibility of why it didn't seal. Okay, just got some of the jars sitting in there. As far as the chicken broth goes, now the recipe, it basically states that you get a chicken and cook it for so long to make your broth and add the other stuff. Well, to me, I always use the extra bits and pieces after I've cut up chickens, and add water in here and just let it cook and cook and cook and cook and cook. Now, it states at this point that you strain all your meat out of it. Well, you see the size of my roaster? I'd have to have somebody, some help. Whenever I'm by myself, the easiest thing for me to do is just get a strainer. I'm waiting on my jars to warm up, so I'm not putting hot liquid into cold jars. I'm only going to pull out like one at a time. And as I pull one out, I'm going to replace it with another one that I've got here sitting waiting. And then that way that jar can start heating up. I don't have anything in my jars. They're just sitting here in a little bit of water getting warm. All right, got my water just a little bit hotter than I wanted. That's what happens when you walk away for a few minutes, you know, watch the pot never boils. So now they're hot, so now I'm going to have to be careful when I pull them out of here so I don't burn my hand. Because the jars may be hot, I'll be moving them with this. Okay, so I've got my funnel in place, got my strainer handy. Keep going like that till I'm where I need to be. It's hot. This way I don't accidentally knock it over. Now I'm just setting the lids on them for right now. I'm not tightening them down because I don't want a fly or a bug while I'm doing the others to get in them. So I've just been setting the lids right on top. And then when I get done, I'll come back and put my rings on. And you just keep going jar to jar like that. I'm going to get it where it's just under that rim, just under the threads for the jar. That vinegar will actually cut that grease off of that rim so that way you're more likely to get a good seal. So I'm just going to get all my jars done and then we'll come back after that. Alright, even though I have my collection of jars over here that need the rings still put on them, this is at least a full canner's worth. Still got a lot of liquid left. I'm going to go ahead and pull these out, get them filled up, and then I'm going to fill my canner up, and then I'll start processing. So I always double check even as I'm going along, especially if it's been a little while since I canned anything, because I tend to can stuff in batches. Then that way I don't have to worry about canning but maybe like once or twice a year. You can always do it following the ball book. It says just buy a chicken and throw it in a pot and let it cook for several hours, and then I'm having to let dogs in and out, sorry y'all. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the rings on jars and get them put in the canner. Those jars are still pretty warm, so they're liable to start making the ping sound. And you would think, oh well, it's sealed. You still gotta process it, even if it pings while you're doing this, because the liquid will hot, it'll still create a vacuum, but you still have to process. It's kind of tricky to get the rings on right with it sitting back there like that. Get this one out of the way. And use my jar lifter. I'll grab my jar real good. And once I get started with the canner, we'll start again. That's going to be a second batch. Because my canner's hot, I got my stove on, had to warm up my jars. The liquid was hot that I was putting in the jars, which is why I needed to warm up the jars. So what I'm doing now is I'm going to get some hot water and add water in my canner with hot water since everything's already hot in here. More hot water. Now the instructions will tell you in the book that you want 1 inch of water over your cans. So that's what I'm going to do. Now that's obviously going to be more than 1 inch over the pints because I'm going to go up to 1 inch over the quarts. With that double stack, I didn't have to have water 1 inch over the top of those top jars. Get it up on high. Now I'm going to put my lid on my canner and just wait for it to start steaming. Shows you on the top arrow. You line up that arrow with this mark, and once that lid is in that position, then you can turn it to close. If you don't have it in the right position, it won't close. Got my heat up on high, got my jars in there. Just gotta wait for steam to start coming out of here. Once the steam has been going good, I can time it for 10 minutes. And once it's been 10 minutes of full steam ahead, then we add the weight. That weight does not go on until it's steaming good for at least 10 minutes. And then once you put that weight on it, your pressure will start building. I follow the ball book guidelines. Now on the recipe, there are some things that I didn't add to my broth. My chicken stock, as what the recipe in the ball book called for, like onion, celery, whatever. It was just to add some more flavor to the broth. I didn't want to do that. I wouldn't want to like add those flavors beforehand. I'll wait till I make a recipe. I didn't grow up around people canning. This was something I wanted to do. It's something I wanted to do. I learned to do it a long time ago. I started out with just jams and jellies and just a normal canner. I just decided after that I wanted a pressure canner and be able to can more. I didn't want to be limited by what they say is safe to just run in a regular canner. So there will be times that you might ruin some food. So if you've never done this and you want to try your hand at it, I can tell you the cheapest, easiest thing to start with, and that would just be canned water, so you'll have some sterile water on hand. If you've never canned, dry beans are like the cheapest thing that you could do next to doing water. Once you try dry beans, then you can move on to more expensive stuff, and you'll feel a little bit more comfortable doing it, especially if you've never been around a pressure canner before. Okay, it's starting to steam pretty good. It's hard to catch it on camera, but you see what I mean? It's not coming out real good yet. You'll be able to see it even on the camera when it's coming out real good. Okay, you can tell it's definitely steaming now. You can see the steam coming out of there really good now. It's not just start-stop a little bit, it's a bunch. There it goes. Whoop. Okay, so 10 minutes. You want to make sure it's steaming really good for 10 minutes before you put your weight on it. I'll be back, put the weight on. Just so you don't get burned, grab it with a pot holder and just stick it on there. And then sit and watch your pressure. Now, as soon as that pressure gets up close to 10, I'm going to start cutting my heat back. Anytime you're pressure canning, if that pressure jumps up and it gets way up there and you start getting over here, you're headed for trouble. You won't have any problems as long as you watch it. When it gets up there close to where I need it to be, I'll start turning my heat down, because I already know that for me on my stovetop, using the pressure canner, by the time I get it up to pressure, I can cut all the way back to simmer. Just don't touch that canner while it's hot, because it'll burn you. It's getting close to 10, so I'm going to start cutting it back. I'm going to cut it from high heat to about medium right off the bat, because I already know that it's going to continue to climb. Number one, it's an electric stove, so it takes longer for it to cool down. But I also know from past experience that by the time it gets up to pressure, I'll probably be down in the simmer. Once I can get it up there to 12, I'm going to go ahead and start my timer with the hopes that as I decrease the heat down, I don't drop under 12. We require 12 pounds of pressure, and so I like to try to hit it somewhere between 12 and 14. Now I'm actually a little over 10 here, so I'm cutting my heat back, and I'm going to go ahead and turn it almost down to the simmer. It's still slowly climbing. It's been about 5 or 6 minutes, and it's went from a little over 12 to now it's at 13. Just kind of a medium simmer. And I'll just have to keep a close eye on it. It's hanging right about 13, and that's on that low simmer. So I'm going to go ahead and set my timer. It only takes 25 minutes for chicken broth. As long as I keep it above that 12, then I'll be good. And we're on the countdown. Do not walk away from your canner and leave it unattended. always keep an eye on it. If you can't, you get called away for whatever reason, turn that heat off. It's really important not to walk away from it at this stage. You stay with it. Okay, timer's going off. As long as it was above 12, we're good. So now I just turn the heat off and just let it sit. You don't remove the weight or don't mess with it. It's really hot. Okay, so it's at 0 pressure. The little pop-up thing has even went down. I'm gonna go ahead, just for safety's sake, pot holder. I probably left it alone for an hour and a half maybe. Still pretty warm. Always open the lid away from you. Hearing pings. We'll give it just a minute. Okay, here we go. I'm gonna pull a little one out first. But that's it. Get my next batch in and get it done. I need to double stack. I'm going to set this in here. Now, since there's only 4 jars, I'm probably going to grab a couple more jars and get water in them. Now, my Presto canner says when you're double stacking, 3 quarts of water. So we're up here where we need to be. And I'm fixing to go ahead and put the lid on it. I've went ahead and I've turned my heat up. I've got 4 jars of just water in here. The jar just all of a sudden like popped a bubble and started bubbling a little bit. And the one back here's bubbling still some. They'll do that for a little while as they cool down. Okay, my 10-minute timer's going off. I'm gonna wait. And try not to drop it. And just slide it on there. I'm not going to drop my heat down until I get to almost 10. Just like the last batch. Because y'all seen it in the last batch. So I'll come back towards the end of this. The first batch I did had the quarts. So it had to go 25 minutes. These are all pints. So it just has to go 20 minutes. Once I get it up to at least 12 pounds of pressure for us. So I'll come back then. Been hearing them ping in the canner. And that's just one of the waters. Pinging in the canner. I think probably most of them have already pinged before I ever even pulled them out of the canner. Because here's the first batch. So doing the chicken the way that I did, with just using the parts and putting it in the roaster and cooking it down, I ended up with 4 pints of stir water, and because it was 2 batches, and I wanted to finish filling up the top of the canner when I put the pints in. But I ended up with 16 pints and 5 quarts of chicken broth. Good, homemade, no salt, no added anything, just pure broth from cooking chicken. There you go. It took a lot of work going through all the steps and then, getting it done. But the end result is I have chicken in my freezer, legs and thighs and wings ready to cook. And then I've got chicken broth. And then I've got the canned chicken. You know, I took extra parts from the chicken that we don't use, and instead of it just going to total waste, it makes good, delicious chicken broth. I hope this helps somebody out. I might have spent a couple days canning all this stuff, but I won't have to worry about that time spent. I'll save that time in the long run.